The alarm blared at 3:17 a.m., cutting through the silence of Dr. Amara Chen's small apartment. She jolted awake, heart hammering against her ribs as she fumbled for her phone in the darkness. Her fingers found the cool glass screen, and she squinted against the harsh light. "Hello." Her voice was thick with sleep. "Dr. Chen, this is General Harris." The voice on the other end was tense, controlled. "Something's entered Earth's atmosphere. It's not one of ours. We need you at HQ immediately." Amara sat up straight, sleep vanishing instantly. "How big?" "Massive. Like nothing we've ever seen. A car will be at your door in 10 minutes. The line went dead. Amara stood frozen for 3 seconds, her mind racing to process what she'd just heard. Then training kicked in. She moved with practiced efficiency, pulling on dark jeans, a black turtleneck, and comfortable boots. She grabbed her pre-packed emergency bag from the closet, a habit her colleagues had once mocked. As Earth's leading xenolinguist, she'd spent 15 years developing theoretical frameworks for alien communication. 15 years of academic ridicule and budget cuts. A waste of resources. The university board had called her department last year when they slashed her funding again. Amara caught her reflection in the hallway mirror as she headed for the door. Dark circles under her eyes, black hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, face pale in the dim light. At 38, she looked older tonight. The government car was already waiting when she reached the street. The driver nodded silently as she slid into the back seat. They drove through empty streets to a waiting helicopter, its blades already spinning. "Do we know anything yet?" Amara asked the pilot as she secured her headset. "Just that it's big, and it's not answering standard communications," he shouted over the roar of the engine. As the helicopter lifted off, Amara stared through the window at the night sky. What had been a normal scattering of stars just hours ago was now dominated by a massive shape darker than the night itself. Something impossible, something alien. It blotted out constellations she'd known since childhood, a void in the familiar pattern of the heavens. Her stomach tightened. This was the moment she'd prepared for all her life, the moment she'd argued was inevitable. Yet now that it was here, doubt crept in. What if her theories were wrong? What if alien linguistics followed none of the universal patterns she'd predicted? "What if I fail?" she whispered, her words lost in the helicopter's noise. The memory of her parents surfaced unexpectedly. Brilliant linguists themselves, they had died in a plane crash, returning from a conference when Amara was just 23. They had believed in her work when no one else did. After their death, she buried herself in her research, finding comfort in the patterns of potential alien languages rather than the messy complexity of human relationships. Human connections had always been difficult for Amara. She understood the structure of language better than the unspoken rules of social interaction. Would alien ones be even more impossible? Or, strangely, might they make more sense? The helicopter began its descent toward a military compound now humming with activity despite the early hour. Vehicles streamed through checkpoints, and personnel in various uniforms hurried between buildings. General Harris waited on the landing pad, a tall woman with silver hair cut in a severe bob. Her face was grim as she helped Amara from the helicopter. It's positioned itself in orbit, she shouted over the fading rotor noise. "NASA says it's roughly 2 kilometers long. We've tried every frequency, every standard greeting protocol." They hurried toward a bunker built into the side of a hill, passing armed guards who stepped aside at the general's approach. "Has it made any aggressive moves?" Amara asked as they entered a long corridor. "No, it just sits there, watching." "That's almost worse." The command center buzzed with controlled chaos, rows of computers, giant screens showing the object from various angles, military personnel, and scientists huddled in tense groups. Dr. Evan Park, Amara's former research partner, rushed toward them. His usually neat appearance was disheveled, shirt wrinkled as if he'd been wearing it for days. "Amara, thank God. It started broadcasting something." He thrust a tablet into her hands. 15 minutes ago. Repeating pattern. Not radio waves, something else, something new. Amara stared at the wavelengths on the screen, her trained eye immediately spotting patterns where others might see only chaos. Her heart began to race, not with fear now, but with the thrill of discovery. "This isn't random," she whispered. "This is language. Complex, structured communication." She looked up at the sea of faces now turned toward her. In their eyes, she saw fear, hope, confusion, and for the first time in her career, respect. "I need my equipment," she said firmly, "and every bit of this broadcast you've captured." As they rushed to comply, Amara cast one last glance at the main screen showing the alien vessel. After a lifetime of preparation, the moment had arrived. Earth's first conversation with the stars was about to begin, and she was the only person who might be able to understand what they were saying. 3 days of non-stop work had brought Amara to this moment. She stood before the United Nations Security Council in New York, exhaustion hidden beneath a calm exterior. The room was filled with the most powerful people on Earth, their faces tense under the bright lights. Amara's voice remained steadied, despite the fear churning in her stomach. "The aliens call themselves the Concordiat. From what I've been able to translate, they're a coalition of at least 7 different species. They want one human representative to board their ship for direct talks." The room erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted over each other in multiple languages. Some stood, gesturing wildly. Others whispered urgently to their aides. The Secretary General banged his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. "Silence," he finally bellowed. When the noise subsided, he turned to Amara. "Dr. Chen, are you certain about this translation?" Amara nodded. "Yes, I've cross-checked it using 3 different methods. The message is clear." "And why would we agree to this?" asked the Russian ambassador, his eyes narrowed. "It could be a trap." "Because they've also made it clear they can vaporize major cities at will," Amara replied bluntly. "They're not asking. They're telling us, politely for now." Fresh murmurs swept through the room. "And who should go?" demanded the Secretary General, his voice heavy with the weight of the question. Amara took a deep breath. This was the moment she had prepared for since the call had woken her 3 nights ago. "I should," she said quietly. The French ambassador laughed. "You? The linguist? We need a diplomat, a statesman." "With respect," Amara countered, "you need someone who can understand them. I've spent the last 72 hours immersed in their language patterns. No one else has that knowledge. No one else can communicate with them directly." General Harris, who had been standing silently at the back of the room, stepped forward. "Dr. Chen is right. She's the only one who stands a chance of meaningful communication, and she's already been cleared by our security team." The debate raged for another 2 hours. Amara stood firm as politicians argued over her head about diplomatic protocols, military options, and contingency plans. Finally, with no better alternative and time running short, they agreed. 6 hours later, Amara stood on a military airfield, dressed in a specially designed suit that contained monitoring equipment and emergency supplies. A team of technicians attached sensors to her body, while government officials delivered last-minute instructions. "Remember, your primary mission is information gathering," said the Secretary of State. "Don't make promises. Don't sign anything." Amara barely heard them. Her eyes were fixed on the small alien craft that had descended to the airfield. A sleek, silver pod with no visible windows or doors. As she approached it, a section simply disappeared, revealing an entrance. "Godspeed, Dr. Chen," General Harris said, squeezing her arm. "The whole world is with you." Amara nodded and stepped inside. The opening sealed behind her. The interior was smaller than she expected, with a single seat that seemed designed for a human body. As soon as she sat down, the pod hummed to life. There was no countdown, no sensation of acceleration. One moment she was on Earth, and the next she was rising rapidly through the atmosphere. Through a suddenly transparent ceiling, she watched her home planet grow smaller below her, Blue oceans, swirling clouds, the curved horizon shrinking to reveal Earth as a delicate sphere against the blackness of space. Alone in the vastness between worlds, Amara reached for the silver locket hanging around her neck. Inside was a tiny photo of her parents, smiling from a summer day long past. Her fingers trembled as she touched it. "I wish you could see this," she whispered. The journey lasted just 20 minutes. The massive alien ship grew larger in view, a structure so enormous it defied comprehension, shaped like an elongated diamond with sections that seemed to shift and rotate independently of each other. The pod docked smoothly inside a vast hangar. When the door opened, Amara stepped out into air that smelled slightly sweet, like cinnamon and metal. Two beings waited for her, tall, slender creatures with iridescent skin and 4 arms. They made gestures she recognized from her studies as greeting and follow. They led her through corridors that seemed alive, with walls that pulsed with subtle light. Amara saw other alien species moving about, some vaguely humanoid, others completely foreign to any earthly concept of life. Some regarded her with what she interpreted as curiosity. Others seemed to barely notice her existence. Finally, they entered a circular chamber with a domed ceiling that displayed what looked like a star map. At the center stood a massive figure, easily 3 meters tall, with broad shoulders and skin like polished obsidian. 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern regarded her coolly. "I am Excelfar," it rumbled in a voice that seemed to bypass her ears and vibrate directly in her chest. "Speaker for the Concordiate High Council." Amara bowed slightly, following the protocol she had observed in their transmissions. "I am Dr. Amara Chen, representative of Earth." Excelfar moved closer, towering over her. The being exuded power and ancient intelligence that made Amara feel like a child in the presence of a mountain. "Humans," it rumbled, studying her with those 4 unblinking eyes. "Primitive but useful. Your species has qualities we find advantageous." Something in the translation made Amara's skin crawl. "We seek peaceful exchange of knowledge and," she began. "You will serve in our war," Selfar interrupted. "The void hegemony threatens all civilized space. Your planet has been selected for the honor of providing soldiers for the Concordiate forces." The true meaning crashed down on Amara like a physical weight. She struggled to keep her expression neutral as horror flooded through her. They didn't want an ambassador. They didn't want peaceful contact or cultural exchange. They wanted slaves. They wanted cannon fodder for a war humanity knew nothing about. And she was alone, billions of miles from home, with this terrible knowledge. 3 weeks had passed since Amara first set foot on the massive alien vessel. 3 weeks of careful observation, hidden note-taking, and growing dread. The Concordiate had given her quarters that resembled a human hotel room, a poor imitation based on their limited understanding of human needs. The space was small but private, which had proven crucial for what she was secretly doing. Each day, Amara attended cultural exchange sessions that were actually assessments of human capabilities. Each night, she documented everything she learned, hiding her notes in a secret compartment she created in her mattress. The terrible truth had become clear. The Concordiate didn't form alliances. They harvested worlds. They identified species with useful traits, then extracted them for war service against their enemies, the mysterious void hegemony. Earth wasn't being invited to join a galactic community. It was being prepared for culling. Amara sat on her bed, trying to suppress her shaking. In yesterday's session, she had seen footage of another planet's recruitment, millions of beings herded into transport ships, families separated, the old and very young left behind on worlds stripped of resources. The Concordiate representatives had shown this with pride, as an example of efficient processing. A soft chime at her door interrupted her thoughts. It slid open to reveal Riz, a small alien barely reaching Amara's waist. Riz had 4 arms, pale blue skin, and large, expressive eyes that seemed perpetually sad. The creature carried Amara's evening meal tray. "Food time, Dr. Chen," Riz said in the simplified Concordiate language they shared. Amara had been befriending Riz carefully over the past 2 weeks, offering small kindnesses that seemed to confuse the small alien at first. Today, she patted the edge of her bed, inviting Riz to sit. "Thank you, Riz. Will you stay a moment?" Riz glanced nervously at the corridor, then shuffled inside, allowing the door to close. "Not allowed," Riz said, but sat anyway. Amara picked at the strange food. Nutrient blocks designed to sustain human biology without consideration for taste or texture. "Riz, why do you serve them?" "The Concordiat?" she asked carefully. Riz's large eyes blinked slowly, a gesture Amara had learned indicated deep emotion. "No choice," Riz whispered, voice dropping even lower. "My world is gone, harvested completely 30 cycles ago. I was bred for service after. Many of my kind here." "Bred?" Amara felt sick. "Yes. Grow us for specific tasks. Good servants, they say. Small, efficient, obedient." Riz's voice carried a sorrow so profound it transcended species. Amara reached out, touching Riz's small hand gently. "I'm sorry." Their conversation was cut short by heavy footsteps in the corridor. Riz leaped up in panic, grabbing the tray. "Must go. Officer Vex does inspection now. Very dangerous. Hates new species." Riz hurried out just as a tall, armored figure appeared in the doorway. This was Officer Vex, a high-ranking Concordia military leader who had made no secret of his disgust for humans during evaluation sessions. His skin was scaled, gray-green, and his eyes were vertical slits that narrowed when he saw Amara. "Human," he growled, entering without permission. "Your species continues to disappoint in testing. Physically weak, emotionally unstable." He prowled around her small room, examining her few possessions with contempt. Amara stood, keeping her face neutral despite her racing heart. "Our strengths may not be immediately apparent in your testing protocols." Vex snorted, a wet, unpleasant sound. "Your arrogance is typical of primitive species. You think you're special." He knocked her few books to the floor. "You're not. You're raw material, nothing more." He moved closer, towering over her. "I've reviewed your planet's data. 7 billion humans. We'll need perhaps 1 billion soldiers. The rest are surplus." The casual way he discussed the disposal of 6 billion lives broke something in Amara. Rage flooded her system, not just fear, but a deep primal fury she'd never experienced before. Vex must have seen it in her eyes. Emotional weakness, he sneered, and suddenly his clawed hand struck out, grabbing her throat. "This is why lesser species serve. You cannot control yourselves." Amara couldn't breathe. The room started to dim. Then something awakened in her, not just rage but determination, a fierce will to live, to warn Earth. She grabbed his wrist with both hands, and with strength she didn't know she possessed, twisted sharply. There was a cracking sound. Vex howled, releasing her. Amara gasped for air, stunned by what she'd done. Vex stared at his limp wrist, then at her with shocked fury. "How?" he snarled. "Your species' strength rating is minimal." Before he could recover, Amara's training in self-defense, classes she'd taken after living alone for years, kicked in. She drove her knee upward into what she hoped was a vulnerable area. It was. Vex doubled over, and Amara darted past him into the corridor. Alarms began to sound. She ran blindly, turning corners, desperate to escape. Finally, she found herself in a dimly lit maintenance tunnel where Riz had once shown her a hiding place. She squeezed into the small space between pipes, trying to quiet her breathing. Hours passed before the alarm stopped. In the darkness, Amara's mind raced. How had she overpowered a Concordiat officer? Their tests had measured human strength as inferior. Something didn't add up. When she finally dared to move, Amara didn't return to her quarters. Instead, she used access codes she'd secretly memorized from watching Riz to enter one of the data storage rooms. With shaking hands, she accessed a terminal, searching for information on human test results. What she found shocked her. The Concordiat hadn't been disappointed by human capabilities. They'd been alarmed. Human neural patterns were unique among all species they'd encountered. The complex web of connections in human brains created patterns the Concordiat couldn't replicate or predict. Most significantly, these patterns resonated with certain Concordiat technologies in ways that could potentially interfere with their systems. The Concordiat wasn't planning to harvest Earth because humans were good soldiers. They were planning to harvest Earth because humans were a potential threat. "We're not weak," Amara whispered, staring at the data scrolling before her. "We're their greatest threat." In that moment, everything changed. She wasn't just fighting to save Earth anymore. She was fighting to reveal a truth that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Human consciousness, human thought patterns, the very things that made them so confusing to the Concordiat, might be the key to freedom, not just for Earth, but for countless enslaved species. Amara began downloading everything she could access. A plan was forming in her mind, dangerous, nearly impossible, but with a slim chance of success. She would need help. She would need Riz and others like him. The hunt for her would intensify soon. She had little time. Alarms wailed throughout the massive ship, red lights flashing in urgent pulses along every corridor. Amara ran, her breath coming in sharp gasps, her makeshift neural interface device humming against her temple. Behind her followed Riz and a dozen other servant aliens, small blue Merisians like Riz, tall spindly Vexians, and bulky orange-furred Taurans, all former slaves, all now rebels. "The neural link is working," she shouted over the screaming alarms, her mind half connected to the ship's systems, strange data flowing through her consciousness like a river of light and code. "Keep moving. We have to reach the central core before they lock it down." For 2 months, she had worked in secret. 2 months of building alliances among the servant species, stealing components, and studying the ship's systems. 2 months of preparing for this moment. Their one chance at freedom. 3 squads approaching from Section 9. Warned Krell, a tall Vexian whose natural ability to sense electrical fields had proven invaluable. "They're moving fast." Amara pressed her hand against a seemingly solid wall. The neural interface transmitted her thoughts directly to the local systems, and the wall slid open, revealing a maintenance tunnel. "This way," she called, ushering the others through. As the last rebel entered, she sealed the passage behind them. Zelfar's voice boomed over the ship's communication system, echoing through every chamber and corridor. "The human has betrayed us. She has corrupted servant minds and stolen critical technology. Capture her and her conspirators immediately." The group hurried through the dimly lit tunnel, ducking under pipes and squeezing through narrow passages designed for maintenance drones. Amara winced as another surge of information flooded her mind. Security protocols, override commands, access codes. The neural interface was working better than she had hoped, but the strain was intense. "They're sealing all paths to the core," she told the others, processing the data flowing through the link. "We need to hurry." Riz moved to her side, 4 small hands carrying tools and spare parts. "Are you okay, Amara? Your nose is bleeding." Amara wiped the blood away. "I'm fine. Just a lot of data." She managed a smile for her friend. When she had first shared her discovery about human neural patterns with Riz, the small alien had been skeptical. But after demonstrating how she could interface with simple systems using a crude device built from stolen parts, Riz had become her most loyal ally, recruiting others who dreamed of freedom. "There," Amara pointed ahead to a large hatch. "That leads directly to the lower core. Once we're in, I can access the main communication array and broadcast the truth to Earth, and to every other world threatened by the Concordiat." As they approached the hatch, a loud bang echoed through the tunnel behind them. The rebels turned to see the entrance they had used bursting open, Concordiat soldiers pouring through. "We're out of time," Amara said. She pressed her hand to the hatch controls, her mind reaching through the interface. The heavy door slid open with a hiss. The group rushed through into a vast chamber. The ship's core, a massive column of pulsing energy stretching from floor to ceiling. Workstations circled the core, their screens displaying ship functions and status reports. But they weren't alone. As the rebels spread out, doors on all sides of the chamber slid open. Concordiat soldiers filed in, weapons raised, and at the main entrance stood Excelfar himself, flanked by Officer Vex, whose arms still showed signs of the injury Amara had inflicted weeks before. Trapped, Riz whispered, fear in those large eyes. Surrounded by at least 30 heavily armed Concordiat soldiers, Amara and her small band of rebels faced impossible odds. The soldiers formed a tight circle around them, cutting off any escape. Surrender, human, Zelfar commanded, his 4 eyes fixed on Amara. Your primitive attempt at rebellion ends here. Your neural patterns are interesting, but your understanding of our technology is laughable. Amara looked around at her friends, beings from different worlds, different species, united by their desire for freedom. They had risked everything to follow her. She couldn't fail them now. She smiled, a gesture that clearly confused Excelfar. No. Before the Concordiat leader could respond, Amara reached for the core's main terminal. The soldiers raised their weapons, but Zelfar held up a hand. Let her try, he said with cruel amusement. Let her see how hopeless her situation truly is. Amara placed both hands on the terminal and closed her eyes. She activated the full neural link, adjusting the settings on her device to maximum. Immediately, her mind exploded with information. Countless streams of data, ship systems, communication protocols, security overrides. Pain seared through her body like fire in her veins, but she held on. Through gritted teeth, she began executing the commands she had prepared. One by one, ship systems began shutting down. Lights flickered, doors sealed, weapon systems went offline. What are you doing? Zelfar roared, his amusement turning to alarm as screens around him began to go dark. Proving our worth, Amara gasped through the pain. Blood now streamed freely from her nose, and her vision blurred, but she pressed on. In her mind, she could see the ship's systems like a vast network of stars, each connection a path she could follow, each node a system she could control. The Concordiat had never imagined that a human mind could navigate their technology this way, could use the very resonance they feared as a weapon against them. Stop her, Zelfar ordered, but the soldiers found their weapons suddenly deactivated, their armor systems failing. Riz and the other rebels seized the moment, rushing the confused soldiers. Despite their smaller size, their knowledge of the ship gave them an advantage in the chaos. Amara pushed deeper into the ship's systems, fighting through the pain. She accessed the communication array, preparing to broadcast everything she had learned. The Concordiat's true plans for Earth, their history of harvesting worlds, their vulnerability to human neural patterns. Zelfar rushed toward her, rage contorting his features. You will doom your own world. If you turn the Concordiat against Earth, nothing will remain of your species. Amara looked up at him, blood streaming down her face, her hands still connected to the terminal. Despite the agony, she smiled again. That's where you're wrong, she said. I'm not just broadcasting to Earth. I'm broadcasting to everyone, every world you've threatened, every species you've enslaved. And I'm showing them how to fight back. With a final surge of mental effort, Amara activated the broadcast. The ship's massive communication array powered up, sending her message across vast distances, to Earth, to Concordiat colonies, to the worlds of the Void hegemony, and beyond. As the message went out, Amara collapsed to her knees, the neural interface smoking against her temple. Riz rushed to her side, supporting her. Around them, the ship's systems continued to fail, plunging sections into darkness. Zelfar stared at the human in disbelief as his great vessel, his symbol of power, slipped from his control. The impossible had happened. A single human, with help from those the Concordiat had deemed insignificant, had brought the mighty empire to its knees. The Concordiat council chamber fell silent as Amara projected images of Earth onto the large viewing screen. Her hands still trembled slightly from the aftermath of the neural link, but her voice was steady and clear. Before her sat representatives of the 7 major species that formed the Concordiat leadership, their expressions ranging from anger to curiosity to grudging respect. 1 week had passed since the rebellion. 1 week of chaos and uncertainty as power shifted throughout the massive ship. The servant species had risen up across every deck, inspired by Amara's broadcast. The Concordiat, facing rebellion not just on this vessel, but across their territory, as other subjugated worlds received her message, had been forced to negotiate. "This is my home," Amara said, gesturing to the images of Earth's cities, forests, oceans, and people. "We're not your soldiers. We're not your slaves. But we can be your allies. As equals." Zelfar, his status diminished but still representing his species on the council, leaned forward. "You have damaged Concordiat ships across 3 sectors. You have revealed classified information to potential enemies. You have incited rebellion. Why should we not simply destroy your world in retaliation?" Amara smiled faintly. "Because you can't afford to. The void hegemony is advancing. You need allies, not slaves. And now everyone knows that human neural patterns can interface with your technology in ways you never imagined." She paused, allowing that fact to sink in. "We could be your greatest weapon against the hegemony, or your worst nightmare." An elder council member, a being with translucent skin that revealed pulsing organs beneath, raised a long, slender hand. "The human speaks truth. Our scientists confirm that their neural capabilities are unique, and the servant uprising has cost us nearly 30% of our military capacity." "We have lost worlds before," growled another counselor, a massive creature with thick armor plates. "Not like this," Amara countered. "Not with the knowledge I broadcast. Every world now knows about the neural interface. Every world now knows the Concordiat's true intentions, and every world is watching to see what happens next." The chamber fell silent again, as the council members exchanged glances. Finally, the translucent elder spoke again. "What do you propose, human?" Amara straightened her shoulders. "A true alliance, equal standing for Earth in the Concordiat, freedom for all servant species with full citizenship rights, and a joint research program to develop neural interface technology for defense against the void hegemony." "Impossible." Zelfar slammed a fist on the table. "The entire structure of the Concordiat is based on the natural hierarchy of species. Then the structure must change," Amara said simply, "or it will collapse entirely." 3 days of tense negotiations followed. Amara, assisted by Riz and representatives from other formerly enslaved species, fought for every point in the agreement. The Concordiat leaders resisted, threatened, cajoled, but ultimately, faced with rebellion throughout their territory and the advancing threat of the void hegemony, they yielded. On the 4th day, the first true Earth Concordiat treaty was signed. Earth would join the Concordiat as a full member world. The servant species were granted freedom and citizenship rights, and a new governing council would include representatives from all worlds, not just the original 7. As news of the treaty spread throughout the ship, celebrations erupted among the former servants. Corridors that had once echoed with the quiet footsteps of the oppressed now rang with songs from a dozen worlds. Amara stood in the observation deck, watching distant stars through the massive viewport. Her body still ached from the neural link, and doctors had warned her there might be permanent damage. But seeing the joy around her, she couldn't bring herself to regret her actions. Riz approached, holding a small device. "The communication link to Earth is ready. Your leaders are waiting to speak with you." Amara nodded. "Thank you, Riz, for everything." The small alien's eyes crinkled in what Amara had learned was a smile. "No, thank you. My people have been servants for 3 generations. We had forgotten what freedom felt like." Riz gestured to the viewport. I never thought I would see the stars and feel hope instead of despair. You helped make this happen, Amara reminded her friend. I couldn't have done this alone. You changed everything, the small alien said, four hands gesturing expressively. You showed them that strength isn't about size or technology. My people will tell stories about you for generations to come. Amara's throat tightened with emotion. She thought of her parents, of how proud they would be. She thought of all she had lost in her lonely pursuit of understanding alien languages, and all she had found on this strange journey among the stars. No, she said softly, I just showed them what humans have always known, that the greatest power comes from connection, not conquest. As they stood together, a group of former servants approached, led by Krell, the tall Vexian who had fought beside them. Ambassador Chen, he said formally, using her new title. The Earth transport is ready whenever you wish to depart. Ambassador. The word still felt strange. When she had boarded the alien pod months ago, she had been a lonely scientist with a desperate mission. Now she returned as Earth's first true representative to the stars. Thank you, Krell. I'll be ready soon. She turned to Riz. Will you come with me? Earth should meet the friends who helped save it. Riz's eyes widened in surprise and delight. It would be my honor. Later, as the transport ship prepared to depart, Amara stood at the viewport with Riz beside her. The massive Concordiate vessel that had once represented a threat now served as the site of a new beginning. Behind them, representatives from a dozen formerly enslaved species prepared for their own journeys, some returning to their homeworlds with news of freedom, others traveling to Earth as the first members of a true galactic exchange. The ship turned toward Earth, its engines humming with power. It carried not just an ambassador, but the beginning of a new galactic order, one built on respect rather than domination, on cooperation rather than subjugation. As the stars streaked past, Amara thought of the message she would deliver to a waiting world. Humanity was not alone in the universe. They faced great dangers. Yes, the void hegemony remained a threat, and the Concordiate's change of heart was born of necessity rather than virtue. But they also had new allies, new technologies, and a new place in a vast community of worlds. The journey ahead would not be easy. Old prejudices would not disappear overnight, and the gap between vastly different species would require patience and understanding to bridge. But for the first time, Amara felt truly hopeful. Ready for the next challenge? Riz asked, sensing her thoughts. Amara smiled. Together, always. The transport accelerated, carrying them home to a world forever changed, to a future bright with possibility.